The world of Julian Vance was one of sterile precision. It existed in the silent hum of his all-electric sedan, the minimalist chill of his penthouse overlooking the city, and the sharp, clean lines of his custom-tailored suits. His life was a fortress built of order and control, designed to keep out the chaotic, messy realities of the world he had fought so hard to escape. Today, however, the fortress had been breached. A single, inexplicable warning light blinked on his car's dashboard, a tiny crimson star of chaos in his perfectly curated galaxy. Then, the silent hum of the electric motor died, replaced by an unnerving stillness. Julian Vance, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, was stranded on an unfamiliar, industrial edge of the city. His assistant's voice, tinny through the phone, was laced with panic. "A tow truck will be there in 2 hours, Mr. Vance. The dealership's fleet is completely booked." 2 hours is unacceptable, he stated, his voice dangerously calm. "Find a local solution." The local solution was a place called Morgan's Auto Repair. The name itself felt an affront, a relic from a bygone era of grease and grit. As Julian stepped out of his inert, futuristic vehicle, the scent of oil and old tires hit him. The garage was a low brick building, its windows grimy, the large bay door open like a gaping mouth. It was the physical embodiment of everything he despised: disorder, inefficiency, and the messy, unpredictable world of manual labor. He walked in, his polished Italian shoes navigating the oil-stained concrete floor with disdain. A young woman was leaning over the exposed engine of a beat-up pickup truck. She wore grease-stained coveralls, her honey-blonde hair pulled back in a messy but functional braid. She didn't look up. "Excuse me," Julian said, his tone clipped. She straightened up, wiping a hand on a rag tucked into her pocket, leaving a faint smudge of grease on her cheek. She wasn't what he expected. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with clear, intelligent blue eyes that held no trace of intimidation. "What can I do for you?" she asked, her voice steady and professional. "My car has broken down outside. It's a Vance Valor EV. I need it repaired immediately." She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Immediately isn't a feature we offer, but I can take a look. What's the issue?" "If I knew the issue, I would have fixed it myself," he replied coolly. "It's the most advanced electric vehicle on the market. I doubt you have the equipment to handle it." The corner of her mouth twitched. "Sir, a car is a car. Wires, batteries, and a computer that thinks it's smarter than it is. Pop the hood. I'll be right there." Julian watched, astonished, as she turned back to the truck. He was used to deference, to people tripping over themselves to accommodate him. This woman with grease on her face and confidence in her eyes was an anomaly. He stood by his dead car, feeling an unfamiliar sense of powerlessness as she approached with a diagnostic tablet that looked surprisingly modern. She plugged it in, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her fingers flew across the screen, her movements deft and sure. She didn't speak, and the silence was only filled by the distant clatter of tools and the soft patter of a light rain beginning to fall. "Your main battery conduit has a microfracture," she said, finally, looking up at him. "It's a design flaw in the early Valor models. Overheats and shorts the whole system. The dealership loves it. They get to charge you for a full battery replacement." Julian was stunned. "How did you know that?" "Because I read," she said simply. "And because I've seen 3 of these in the last year. I can bypass the damaged conduit and patch the circuit. It'll be stronger than the original. It'll take me about an hour." An hour? His official dealership had quoted him 2 hours just for a tow. He watched as she worked, a strange sense of fascination creeping in. He saw the quiet competence, the focused intensity. She wasn't just a mechanic. She was a surgeon, operating on the heart of his hyper-modern machine with an almost ancient understanding of how things worked. For the first time in a long time, Julian Vance was looking at something he couldn't acquire, couldn't control, and couldn't understand. And it was utterly captivating.
Julian waited inside the garage's tiny, cluttered office. The room was a time capsule, A faded calendar from a decade ago hung crookedly on the wall, and the air smelled of old paper and stale coffee. He sat on a worn vinyl chair that squeaked with every slight movement, feeling like a visitor from another planet. Through the glass, he watched her. He saw the name stitched in red on her coveralls, C. Morgan. He had built an empire on predicting patterns, on understanding systems. But C. Morgan was a system he couldn't map. She moved with a fluid grace that defied the grit of her surroundings. She wasn't trying to impress him. In fact, she seemed completely oblivious to his presence, lost in the intricate dance of her work. This lack of awareness of who he was, of his power, was both insulting and deeply intriguing. Exactly 62 minutes later, she wiped her hands on her rag and walked over. "All done. The system is rerouted. You won't have that problem again." "What do I owe you?" he asked, pulling out his wallet, a sleek, minimalist piece of black titanium. She named a price that was so reasonable, so honest, that it took him a moment to process. It was less than what he spent on lunch. He pulled out a stack of $100 bills, counted out 10, and held them out to her. "For your time and discretion." She looked at the money, then back at him, and for the first time her professional calm wavered, replaced by a flash of pride. "I gave you a bill, Mr. Vance. The price is the price. We don't take tips like that here." "Consider it an investment in good service," he insisted, pushing the money closer. "No," she said, her voice firm but not disrespectful. "I did my job. You pay for the work. That's how it's supposed to be." She wrote up the invoice on a carbon copy pad, her handwriting neat and clear, and handed it to him. Stunned into silence, Julian paid the exact amount. As he walked back to his now purring car, he felt a strange, unsettling mix of admiration and annoyance. He was a man who moved the world with money, yet this woman had effortlessly refused its power. He drove away, but the image of her, the smudge of grease on her cheek, the unwavering clarity in her eyes, stayed with him. The next day he couldn't focus. During a board meeting, while his executives debated billion-dollar acquisitions, his mind kept drifting back to the scent of motor oil and the quiet competence of a woman in coveralls. He found an excuse to return. He told his assistant he'd left a custom-made fountain pen, a gift from a Japanese dignitary, at the garage. It was a lie, but it was the only logical reason he could construct for going back. He arrived in the late evening. The main lights were off, but a single bare bulb illuminated the small office. He found her there, not working on a car, but hunched over a stack of papers at the desk, her head in her hands. The formidable mechanic was gone, replaced by a young woman who looked like she was carrying the weight of the world. He knocked softly on the doorframe. She looked up, startled, her eyes red-rimmed. The tough exterior had vanished, revealing a raw, heartbreaking vulnerability. I think I left my pen here," he said, the lie feeling flimsy and absurd now. She shook her head, not bothering to hide her distress. "There's no pen." He paused, abandoning the pretense. "Are you all right?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Define all right." "The bank is threatening to foreclose. My suppliers are demanding cash up front, and my sister just got accepted into her dream university, and I have no idea how I'm going to pay the first tuition bill. So no, I'm not all right." She looked at him, the frustration and despair clear on her face. "This garage, it was my father's. He poured his whole life into it. He died 2 years ago, and I've been trying to keep it afloat ever since, but I'm failing." The confession hung in the air between them. He wasn't a CEO in that moment, and she wasn't a mechanic. They were just two people in a dimly lit office, surrounded by the ghosts of old debts and broken dreams.
Julian didn't know what to say. The language of empathy was one he had long forgotten, replacing it with the cold calculus of profit and loss. He saw her problem not as a human tragedy, but as a business on the brink of collapse. His instinct was to solve it, to write a check and make the problem disappear. But he remembered her refusal of his tip, the fierce pride in her eyes. A simple handout would be an insult. "Let me see your books," he said, the words surprising even himself. She looked at him, suspicion clouding her features. "Why? So you can see how badly I'm failing?" "No," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "So I can see where the bleeding is. You're running a business, not a charity. Maybe you're looking at it from the wrong angle." She hesitated for a long moment, a battle of pride and desperation waging within her. Finally, with a sigh of resignation, she pushed a worn ledger across the desk. For the next hour, they sat in silence, broken only by the rustle of papers and his occasional, quiet questions. He saw it immediately. She was a brilliant mechanic, but she was hemorrhaging money on outdated inventory and unfavorable supplier contracts her father had signed years ago. "You're a genius with an engine, C. Morgan," he said, finally looking up, "but you're letting sentiment run your business." "It's Clara," she corrected him quietly. "My friends call me Clay." "Clara," he repeated, the name feeling unfamiliar and personal on his tongue. He spent another hour outlining a strategy, renegotiating with suppliers, liquidizing old stock, investing in updated diagnostic software to attract a higher-end clientele. He wasn't just giving her advice, he was giving her a masterclass in business survival. As he spoke, she listened, her initial suspicion replaced by a focused intensity. She wasn't just hearing him, she was learning, absorbing, her sharp mind processing every detail. When he finished, she looked not defeated, but energized. "Thank you," she said, and for the first time, he saw a genuine, unguarded smile. It transformed her face, lighting her up from within. Just as a fragile truce of respect began to form, the office door creaked open. A man in a slick, expensive suit strode in, his smile predatory. He looked around the shabby office with open contempt before his eyes landed on Clay. "Clara, darling, still playing with your daddy's old toys?" he said, his voice oozing condescension. "I have the final offer from my clients. 100,000 for the whole property. Take it. It's more than this dump is worth." Clay's face hardened. "Marcus, I've told you before, the garage is not for sale." "Don't be a fool," Marcus sneered. "My investors want this land for luxury condos. This neighborhood is changing. You can't stop progress. Sign the papers, take the money, and go open a little shop somewhere else." Julian stood up slowly, his presence suddenly filling the small room. Marcus hadn't even noticed him sitting in the shadows. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded, his smug demeanor faltering. "He's a customer," Clay said quickly, trying to de-escalate. Julian looked from Marcus's predatory smirk to Clay's defiant stance. He recognized Marcus, a bottom-feeder real estate developer, known for strong-arming small business owners. And in that moment, Julian made a choice. "No," he said, his voice low and carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. "I'm her new business partner, and as of this moment, Mr. Thorne, the price of this property has gone up to $10 million. Now get out of our office."
Marcus Thorne stared, his jaw slack. He glanced from Julian's stone-cold expression to Clay's shocked one. The air in the tiny office crackled with tension. "Business partner?" he scoffed, recovering his swagger. "You think this Wall Street type is gonna save you? He'll get tired of the grease and leave you with even more debt." "The only person leaving is you," Julian said evenly, taking a step forward. His calm was more menacing than any shout. The offer is off the table. In fact, I'd advise you to withdraw all interest in this block entirely." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You don't know who you're dealing with, and you clearly have no idea who you're dealing with," Julian retorted. He pulled a business card from his wallet and flicked it onto the desk. Marcus glanced down. Vance Holdings. Julian Vance, CEO. The color drained from Marcus's face. He had heard the name, of course. Everyone in the city had. Julian Vance was a legend, a ruthless, untouchable titan of the tech world. To find him here, in this crumbling garage, defending this no-name mechanic? It didn't compute. Without another word, Marcus turned and stalked out, the slam of the door echoing his defeat. Silence descended. Clay sank into her chair, her head spinning. "What was that? What did you just do?" "I made a business decision," Julian said, turning to her. His expression was unreadable. "You can't be my partner," she said, shaking her head. "You don't know anything about this world. This isn't a boardroom." "You're right," he said. "It's not. It's better. It's real. I'll provide the capital and the business strategy. You provide the genius and the heart. We'll turn this place into the most respected, high-performance auto shop in the city." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do this?" "Because," he said, his gaze intense, "I haven't felt this engaged in years. And because I want to see what happens when someone like Marcus Thorne loses." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Julian was true to his word. He injected capital, not as a loan, but as an equity investment. He brought in his top accountants to streamline her books and his lawyers to restructure her debt. Clay, in turn, threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. She hired 2 new, talented mechanics, and with the new equipment Julian funded, she started taking on complex jobs she'd had to turn away before. They were an unlikely pair. He would arrive in the mornings in his tailored suit, coffee in hand, and they would go over projections in the dusty office. Then he would loosen his tie, roll up his sleeves, and watch, fascinated, as she diagnosed a sputtering engine or recalibrated a transmission. He learned the difference between a socket wrench and a torque wrench. She learned the difference between gross revenue and net profit. One evening, they were working late, sharing a pizza on the hood of a classic Mustang they were restoring. "You never told me why your car really broke down," she said, looking at him over her slice of pepperoni. He was quiet for a moment. "It didn't." She stared at him. "What?" "I had my head of tech remotely trigger a false warning light and a temporary system shutdown. I wanted an excuse to come back." Clay didn't know whether to be furious or flattered. "You orchestrated the whole thing?" "I created an opportunity. What you did with it, that was all you." But Marcus Thorne wasn't a man who accepted defeat. A week later, a city inspector showed up with a clipboard and a grim expression, citing an anonymous tip about environmental violations. He threatened to shut them down. Clay panicked, but Julian remained calm. He made one phone call. An hour later, the inspector received a call from the mayor's office. The inspection was abruptly concluded. "How did you do that?" Clay asked, amazed. "Marcus plays dirty," Julian said, his eyes hard. "I just play to win."
The failed inspection was just the beginning. Marcus, unable to attack them directly, started a whisper campaign. He spread rumors among suppliers that Morgan's Auto was financially unstable, causing several key vendors to hesitate. He tried to poach her new mechanics with offers of higher pay. But the garage, under Julian's strategic guidance and Clay's expert leadership, was becoming a fortress. Their reputation for quality work, especially on high-end and electric vehicles, was spreading. Julian, for his part, was undergoing a transformation. The sterile precision of his old life began to feel empty. He spent less time in his penthouse and more time at the garage. One afternoon,
Clay found him in the office, not on a business call, but on the phone with her sister, Lily, patiently explaining a complex calculus problem for her homework. The sight made her heart ache with a feeling she was too scared to name. Their partnership had blossomed into a deep, unspoken friendship. They respected each other's minds, but it was the quiet moments that truly connected them. Sharing a knowing glance when a difficult engine finally turned over, or the easy silence as they watched the sunset from the garage roof, feet dangling over the edge. The final battle with Marcus came unexpectedly. Julian discovered, through his extensive network, that Marcus's entire condo project was financed with a highly leveraged, high-risk loan from a notoriously ruthless overseas firm. The loan was contingent on him breaking ground by the end of the quarter. He was running out of time. Armed with this knowledge, Julian arranged a meeting, not in an office, but in the neutral territory of a downtown coffee shop. "It's over, Marcus," Julian said calmly, sliding a file across the table. It contained a detailed breakdown of Marcus's precarious financial situation and a list of every dirty trick he had pulled against Clay. "You walk away from Clay Morgan and her property, or I send this file to your lenders. They don't appreciate partners who attract this kind of trouble." Marcus looked at the file, his face pale. He was trapped. That evening, Clay found a simple unmarked envelope on her desk. Inside were the signed legal documents from Marcus, relinquishing all claims and offers on her property, and underneath another document, the deed to the garage. Julian had bought out the bank loan. He had transferred 49% of the ownership back to her, free and clear, with the remaining 51% held by a new company they had formed together, M&V Automotive. She found him in the main bay, staring at the classic Mustang they had finished restoring. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice thick with emotion. He turned to her, and the usual wall of corporate reserve was gone. His eyes were open, vulnerable. "You don't have to say anything. Just don't stop being you. You reminded me of a world I thought I had to leave behind. A world where things are built with your hands, where your word is your bond." "My father would have liked you," she whispered. "He would have thought I was a stiff in a suit," Julian said with a half-smile. "No," she said, stepping closer. "He would have seen what I see, someone who knows the value of things that can't be bought." He reached out, his hand gently touching the grease smudge that was almost permanently on her cheek now. "And what do you see, Clara?" "I see a man who needed his car fixed," she said softly. He leaned in, his gaze searching hers. "The car is fine. It's the driver that was broken." And in the middle of the garage, surrounded by the smell of oil and the promise of a future they would build together, he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion or possession, but of recognition. Two different worlds, two broken people who had finally found the one part that made them both whole. Their life didn't become a fairy tale. It became something better, a working partnership. M&V Automotive became the city's premier destination for specialty and high-tech car repair. Clay ran the floor, her intuitive genius with machines, now backed by the best equipment and a hand-picked team. Julian handled the expansion, franchising their model of honest, high-quality service. They were a perfect engine, her skill and his strategy driving them forward. Clay's sister, Lily, graduated with honors, her tuition fully funded by the garage's profits. At her graduation party, held in the now spotless and thriving garage, she pulled Julian aside. "Thank you," she said, her eyes shining. "You didn't just save the garage, you gave me my sister back, the real her." Julian looked across the room at Clay, who was laughing with a group of her mechanics, her face bright and unburdened. "No, Lily," he said quietly, "she saved me." One cool autumn evening, A year after their first meeting, Julian led Clay to the roof of the garage. He had strung fairy lights along the railing, and a small table was set for two. The city skyline glittered in the distance, a world away. "I have a new business proposition for you," he said, his voice serious. Clay raised an eyebrow. "Are you trying to acquire my 49%? "No," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I'm proposing a merger, a permanent one." He knelt down on one knee on the gritty rooftop, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a single, perfectly crafted ball bearing, polished to a mirror shine. Clay burst out laughing, tears welling in her eyes. "Is that a ball bearing?" she asked. "It represents perfect, frictionless motion," he said. "It's what we are together." He then reached into another pocket and pulled out a second box, this one containing a simple, elegant diamond ring. "But I figured you might want this one, too." "Clara Morgan," he said, his voice full of a warmth she now knew was his alone, "will you be my partner in business and in life?" She didn't hesitate. "As long as you don't mind getting a little grease on your suit." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They weren't the polished CEO and the struggling mechanic anymore. They were just Julian and Clay, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built a life that was more real and more beautiful than either of them could have ever designed alone.
If this story of grit, integrity, and unexpected love resonated with you, and if it reminded you that our true worth lies not in our circumstances but in our character, then we invite you to become part of our community. Subscribe to CEO Stories Uncovered for more tales that heal, inspire, and celebrate the incredible power of the human heart. Like, share, and comment to let us know your thoughts. Until next time, keep building something real.